In early 2025, the United States dramatically escalated its trade protectionism under President Donald Trump, introducing sweeping reciprocal tariffs on imports. These measures were justified as a response to America's trade deficits and what the Trump administration called unfair practices by trading partners. In practical terms, the US imposed a baseline 10% tariff on all imports from all countries. On top of that, higher rates were slapped on nations with which the US runs large trade imbalances, a category that includes Japan. As a result, Japan suddenly found virtually all of its exports to the US facing a hefty tariff averaging about 24%. But on top of that, these new tariffs came in addition to separate US duties, specifically targeting the auto industry. President Trump long complained about the auto trade gap, and in March 2025, he followed through on threats by unveiling a 25% tariff on imported cars and light trucks. That 25% auto tariff took effect in early April, dealing a direct blow to one of Japan's most important export industries. What these all mean is that Japan's economy is in danger. From their perspective, this was quite a harsh wake-up call. As a close US ally and major investor in American factories, Tokyo had hoped to be spared the worst of Trump's trade volleys. Japanese officials, extremely disappointed at not winning an exemption, questioned the move's consistency with World Trade Organization rules. And despite weeks of diplomatic efforts to change Washington's course, Japan woke up to news that it would indeed be subject to these tariffs based on what the US deemed a 46% trade imbalance in its favor. In other words, because the US imports much more from Japan than vice versa, the Trump administration argued Japan's goods should face steep tariffs until trade is more reciprocal. To show you what Trump basically means, here's a graph on the US and Japan trade balance, data from the US Census Bureau. Here on the graph, you can see that the figure is at a deficit. That is because the US imports far more goods from Japan than it exports to Japan. In simple terms, America buys more from Japan than Japan buys from America. This trade gap is what Trump complains about. He believes it's unfair and wants to fix it by changing trade rules or adding tariffs to Japanese products. But just how will Trump's reciprocal tariff hit Japan's economy? Well, for you to understand how this will happen, it is first important to understand Japan's exports. If we graph out Japan's largest exports by country, we see that the largest is no other than the United States. Here on the graph, you can see that the US, as of the year 2023, had contributed a massive $143 billion to Japan's overall exports. That's no small figure. It accounts for over 18.7% of Japan's total exports for that year. And this substantial export of Japan to the United States is one of the reasons why Japan has accumulated massive foreign reserves. As we saw the graph earlier, on the trade balance of Japan and the United States, that very trade balance is positive, meaning Japan exports more than it imports overall. It sells more goods to the United States than it buys from them, to the tune of tens of billions of dollars every single year. That massive trade surplus of Japan has enabled them to build up strong financial reserves and maintain a stable economy. It gives Japan the ability to invest overseas, manage its currency more effectively, and respond to global financial crises. As a matter of fact, if we even graph out the largest holders of US debt, also known as US Treasuries, we get to see just how far above Japan is. Here on the graph, as of January 2025, you can see that Japan holds a massive $1 trillion in US Treasuries. This is no small figure, and it far surpasses China, which was the second largest holder at $760 billion. The reason why they were able to buy US Treasuries, or as some may say, the reason why they are able to lend money for the US government, is because of this ongoing trade surplus. Every year, Japan earns more dollars than it spends through its exports, especially to the US. With all these extra dollars, Japan then invests a portion into US government bonds, effectively becoming one of America's biggest creditors. But as Trump raises tariffs on Japan, their ability to build up foreign reserves and invest them into, say, US treasuries would slow down significantly. With fewer exports, Japan earns fewer US dollars. And without those extra dollars flowing in, Japan simply won't have as much to invest overseas. This means they might scale back on buying US treasuries, which, as mentioned earlier, is one of the main ways the US finances its national debt. But it is worth noting that the dangers of Trump's tariffs to Japan are going to be specific. Yes, while it is true that Japan's economy as a whole is in danger from Trump's tariffs, there are specific industries that would bear the brunt of the impact more than others. Chief among them is the automotive industry. Japan's car makers, like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan, are some of the country's biggest exporters, especially to the United States. If we graph out the exports of Japan to the United States by category, we get to see that the single largest category is indeed cars, tractors, trucks, and basically the entire automotive industry. It contributes a massive $50.8 billion, which is 35.5% of Japan's total exports to the US. So, if we think about tariffs on Japanese exports, they are mostly going to hit this specific industry. Companies like Toyota, Honda, Nissan, Mazda, and Subaru are right at the center of this storm. These companies have long relied on the US market for a significant share of their global sales. So, when a 25% tariff is suddenly added to every car or truck they ship to America, it immediately makes their products more expensive compared to US or other non-tariffed competitors. But that's what Trump wants to begin with anyway. He wants Japanese companies to build more cars inside the United States instead of exporting them from Japan. By making imported vehicles more expensive through tariffs, Trump is trying to push companies like Toyota and Honda to expand their factories in states like Texas, Alabama, or Ohio, bringing more manufacturing jobs to American workers. But that's the danger for Japanese automotive companies. In Japan, the automotive companies contribute significantly to the domestic economy. Some estimates say that they contribute around 3% of Japan's GDP, and they employ millions, when you include the vast network of suppliers and affiliated industries like steel, tires, and electronics. You can easily see the dangers and pitfalls of this when we take a look at Japan's stock market. Here's a graph on the Nikkei 225, which is Japan's main stock market index, tracking the performance of 225 top companies listed on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. As the tariffs were announced and then confirmed, the Nikkei 225 took a noticeable hit. As you can see on the graph, in late March 2025, the Nikkei 225 was trading at a rate of 37,000 to 38,000 points. But as the tariffs emerged, the Nikkei 225 fell dramatically to just 33,780 points as of the time of writing. That's a decrease of over 10%, wiping out billions of dollars in market value in just a matter of weeks. You can also see this more evidently if we graph out Toyota's stock price. Here on the graph, you can see the same story. Toyota was trading at more than 190 per share back in late March, but after the tariffs emerged, the share price dropped to over 158 a share as of the time of writing. So, to put it simply, the auto industry of Japan is indeed going to feel the biggest impact. A study published by the United Nations Trade Agency even estimated that Japan could lose about $17 billion in auto export sales in the US under the new tariff regime. So, beyond the stock market, auto industry and exports of Japan, what else could be impacted? Well, some researchers and economists like Takahide Kiuchi of Nomura Research Institute have said that a 25% US auto tariff alone could shave approximately 0.2 percentage points off Japan's GDP. That may not really seem a lot, right? After all, Japan's GDP as of 2023 was over $4.2 trillion, meaning that a 0.2 percentage point drop would equal around $8.4 billion in lost economic output. But here's the thing. In an economy barely growing, that's significant. Potentially the difference between slight growth and contraction. And that figure is just for the auto tariff piece. When you factor in the broader 24% reciprocal tariff on all Japanese goods, covering not just autos, but electronics, machinery, etc. The hit gets larger. The Daiwa Institute of Research projects Japan's real GDP could be 0.6% lower in 2025 due to the US tariffs. Some analysts think it might be even worse if the situation escalates or confidence really falters. Estimates of up to 0.8% of GDP lost have been mentioned in financial circles. So, 0.8% loss would now result in about $33.6 billion in lost economic output for Japan, which is indeed a big blow. So, is there any way out of this? Well, the Japanese government is doing what it can to respond diplomatically. Prime Minister Ishiba indicated he would strongly urge the US to review the measures and even speak to Trump directly at an appropriate time. Japan can make a reasonable case. Japanese companies have created millions of American jobs through investment. Japan is a staunch ally, and its markets are not as closed as portrayed. For example, Japan points out it imposes 0% tariff on imported cars itself. There are other means that Japan is also preparing, ranging from fiscal and monetary responses. But for now, it's most likely going to be a wait and see. But anyway, do let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.